So here's a big trend that I think is interesting for people listening. Anything new that's fresh, there's like this new wave, I think, of consumers now in China. They're really sick of the old stuff, right? So they'll take a deal on your older stock, but if you have like new stock, you can sell it very quickly at full price right now, at least right this season. I think there's a limit in the supply chain globally. And so if you actually have fresh inventory, so the new in-season stuff or next season stuff coming in, I think you'll do quite well. I mean, my brands that are doing that are crushing it. The ones that are kind of having supply chain problems, it's a bit of a muted sort of period for them. But the ones with full stock of the new stuff are selling out quite quickly and at higher margins than we ever expected.
This video is sponsored by Vfluencer, a multi-language competitive intelligence platform for China's digital commerce footprint. China is a complicated and a competitive market, so make sure you optimize your sales and marketing efforts with real-time data. Go to www.vfluencer.com to request a demo. Vfluencer helps your brand optimize sales and marketing in China.
Hi, I'm Annie Ciara, your host for China Connex. This video series brings you market insights, consumer trends, and everything you need to know about doing business in China. Our guests are entrepreneurs and China business professionals. Today, we will be discussing all things China digital with CEO and co-founder of KungFu Data, Josh Gardner. KungFu Data are experts in onshore e-commerce operation, from market entry consulting, store operation, and helping underperforming stores. KungFu Data's sole mission is to bring brand owners a level of transparency they never thought it was possible. Josh moved to China in 1995 and is a fluent Mandarin speaker. Josh has built KungFu Data to be the leading voice of China commerce and worked with over 100 brands and have generated $1 billion in revenue for their clients. I am extremely excited and intrigued to learn how someone studying anthropology in Boston University ended up in Harbin, China 26 years ago. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. That's great. That was a cool introduction.
I think your background is so interesting. Perhaps tell us a little bit more about you. Where did you grow up and how did you end up in China?
Well, I was born and raised in a small town outside of Boston, north of Boston. My biggest influence, which sent me to China, I was in high school, I was in Spanish, and my grandfather, he was that old generation post-war, former Air Force pilot, and then went into, sales actually, later in, I think it was in the late 40s, and ended up being a part of that wave of American companies becoming multinationals. And the firm that he became head of sales for sent him first to Europe. So after he did all of the States, then they started sending him to Europe and eventually ended up in Asia. And just on business, doing travel. And he fell in love with Hong Kong, with Thailand, with like all of this. And all of his really close friends and customers were overseas Chinese. And when I was growing up, he said to me, look, you got to stop this Spanish thing. When you get to college, you need to switch to Chinese. And I said, why? And he said, they're going to inherit the world. And it struck me. And I was like, really? And then that sort of, and I believed him, he had been in international business for like the better part of 50 years at that time. And I trusted him. So I decided when I got to school, I left Spanish, switched to Chinese, and I was very interested in seeing the world and doing field work, kind of an adventurous spirit back at the time. So I moved to China and I ended up in Harbin because that was where the program was. So I was at Hagongda, so Harbin Institute of Technology, for a semester. And I did that. And then I ended up in Beijing Shoushida, Shoulushifen Daxue. It's teacher's college. And spent some time there, and then later at Yunnan University, where I decided to do my undergraduate, my big undergraduate like sort of dissertation thing that I had to do for my program. And I hooked up with a professor from Yunnan University who is an Izu, so he's E, minority. And we both went around. His family was very connected in the province. And at the time, in the 90s, if you didn't have that kind of guanxi, you couldn't even enter areas of Yunnan. It was banned for foreigners. Like foreigners weren't allowed. They were very
guanxi, as you mean relationship, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, military relationships, right? I mean, this is like they control the airports and access areas, right? The region. So it was kind of an interesting time. In the 90s, it was a different time in China when you visited as well. It was more like the perfect time to learn Chinese because no one spoke English. So it's like the Peace Corps. When you go join the Peace Corps and they want to teach you a language, they teach you as if you're a small child. They drop you off in a place where there are absolutely no people that speak English and you have to learn.
I saw a video of one of your speeches and you were telling a story on how you were the only Lawai, or like a foreigner in the village. And the way you gained their trust was through drinking and playing games, right? And from my experience in doing business in China or in Asia, building a business relationship is through drinking. So since we are on the topic of doing business in China, name like one thing that Westerners need to learn on how to do business when they go to China.
The gravity of the scale of nuances that you need to learn to do well in China in business is epic. The scale of the market gravity, the pressure it puts on you, and the culture that is sophisticated and complex in every way requires a lot of skill. I don't know which one to share. Like one thing, I think a really helpful one, which could be good for people even outside China, if you really want to, as an example, invest in real estate. Just give an example. And you want to be sure you're going to make 20%. Hire, okay, an agent who specializes in Chinese investors overseas. And the reason, I'm going to give you a quick insight. Chinese never do things alone, as opposed to the average individualistic foreigner who thinks only in their own worlds. Chinese don't ever do anything alone. China is a we, us, and our place, not a me, my, and I. Therefore, the people that win do it as a we, and the I's know that. So the people that get we make lots of money. So what do the Chinese do? At scale, they come into communities and buy as many units as they can and drive the price up. They never buy as individuals. They go through agents where at least a minimum of 100 to 500 units will be sold to them. And then they get the next group so they can pyramid value into housing. They've done it everywhere. Hong Kong, Taiwan, Sing, all over China, Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah,
they try to do it in Toronto, Vancouver, pick a place, any place that they can come in and have a massive impact. Your marketplace has to be big enough to keep values down because they will come in as a group and do it. So that's one thing you can learn from me. Simple stuff like that. Don't try to do things alone. Initially, I didn't want to go into business, right? I wanted to be in academics. The problem was, and this is 97 when I graduated, there are no jobs for anthropologists, right? I mean,
yeah, I know. Like, what jobs do you get as an anthropologist?
Exactly. You know, you say that now, but right, if I was graduating today, all of Silicon Valley would hire me. I mean,
really?
Google hires, absolutely. Industrial anthropology is an extremely valuable trade, especially if you're doing things like they're developing a new product and they want to know how human beings are going to interface with it and react and what the cultural implication might be, or how it's going to change, you know, psychology, sociology of the human race. So they'll be looking at that predictive ethnography. So if we introduce something, how might it impact humanity? this kind of thing. And so there are jobs for these kind of people. Like you look up industrial anthropology, there's definitely work, but there was none in 97. So I needed to work. And so I had kept a lot of good relationships. And one of them was a friend who graduated a year before me. He was in business school somewhere, I think in New York, at American or something, or Washington, and ended up getting to Shanghai and getting a job at, I think it was one of the first like boutique market research firms in Shanghai. This guy was very clever. He was from Hong Kong, but he had a global logistics house with like 6 offices: Beijing, Shanghai, Nanjing, Hong Kong, New York, and one other place. And he just minted money. He was so smart. What he did was he hired foreigners who were fluent in Mandarin that could run his offices and meet with all the foreign executives, and vice versa outside China.
Wow.
So he would hire Chinese, give them a green card or move them to the States to help run his operations in China from the US, even though they were fluent in English. He was super clever. So he reversed us, right? So he made me an expat and them expats, right? So they left China to come to the States. I left the States to come to China. Very clever. And he did it with a bunch of different people. And it was quite a successful business as a result. But I hated him. He was a mean guy. And it was an awful experience. And then it's going to answer your question why I started my first company. I started my first company because I absolutely couldn't imagine that working for someone would be fun, and nice, and I could learn. And I had it. I was abused for years. I just hated it for those 2 years and decided to strike out on my own, not because I had a vision to change the planet or do something that remarkable, just I couldn't imagine it being worse on your own than working for someone. So that was the impetus to start my first business. And here we are, 6 businesses later. So for better or worse, I ended up in this track, and looking back in time, not really the smartest decision. I think, first of all, I try to be like literally the opposite of that boss. Nurturing, mentoring, coaching, training. I stick up, I fall on the sword for my people. I'm all about servant leadership, and I believe that it's the only way to truly grow and build an excellent organization, both in and out of China. And that was the first business that actually did well up until the financial crisis. And then that took a punch. But anyway, the company, the brand that I built, the business itself is still successful today. So that was, and I exited, but I ended up moving to Shanghai towards the end of 2013 and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And at that time, I had friends in the States who were trying to convince me to go into the data business. And I go up to Beijing and I look at what they're doing, and I look at the back end of the data they have, and I was blown away. And that's when I decided, all right, we're going to go into this. Now, here's a mistake. I thought I could legitimately build a data subscription business. I really did. I really thought that I could build a data platform. Now, this is end of 2013. So going into 2014, we registered the company. And at first we started by building a data engine that we had. We had our own scraping, we have our own data, all this stuff, very useful stuff. And
so that's why it's called KungFu Data.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say, like, I spent 9 months in a row and we only ever signed one client for data subscription. And I didn't understand why for a while, but later I realized in China, people won't pay for data. And then they hate consultants. They don't want to pay for consultants either. It was just a nightmare. And then finally, during the fall of 2014, I remember this, one of my clients, American, very successful business in China. He sees me there. I'm trying to teach his team what to do. I'm like, all right, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna launch the store. He said, you guys are super impressive, right? Your whole team, you guys know what you're doing. You know the data, you know the business, you know the marketing. You used to run e-commerce in the States for yourself. You built your brand. Why don't you just do it for us? And that was my first TP contract. And so we were invited as a result of that brand into the TP pool. And in early 2015, we're registered for both Tmall Global and Tmall Domestic as a Tmall partner. And that's when we started signing a lot of brands.
So since we are discussing all things China digital, and you have talked a little bit about KungFu Data and what you do, but who is KungFu Data and what exactly do you do now?
Question. So just be straight up. We have 85 people roughly split between Beijing and Shanghai. And then of course we have team in consulting outside China. And basically what we do is very simple. We launch and operate brands online, okay, in China. And so we do all digital commerce related activities. For a lot of the brands, we're doing pretty sophisticated social seeding, live stream and live commerce, lots of live engagement and sort of video marketing. I mean, basically, what's separated outside of China is merged together inside China. So it's, so the world of activation and marketing and brand building and stuff has kind of merged into commerce. So everything's social. So you're having to do a lot of this. In addition to that, and integrating all of that activity into commercial channels. And our core business, of course, is operating. We have, I think, 27 stores online in China at present among brands and growing, obviously. So our job is really, we handle all the project management, all the planning, all the merchandising, all the inventory management, all the logistics, customer service, design, creative, marketing, media optimization, performance marketing, activation,
wow, Josh.
Oh, and did I mention that we now have live stream studios in house? So we have a Hollywood production. There's Tencent, Ali, and now ByteDance is a big one. Or I should say, if you are selling cheap stuff and you want to do group buying, you could do Pinduoduo, right? If you have a low end, sort of, if your price collection is in that range. But for most of my clients, they're in a premium positioning. That's off the table, right? So it's really right now, I say right now because things change this thing is going to expire. Whatever I say right now, a year from now, I'm saying something different, okay? But right this minute, as of right now, we have 5 core channels, right? But they're in 3 ecosystems, primarily, right? So it's ByteDance is TikTok. In China, it's called Douyin, right? And Douyin is actually a genuine threat to Alibaba's reign. And if you look at budgets, we just did a piece on this, people are allocating almost as much to Douyin as they are to JD or more. That should tell you something. So we all operators, all brands, we all know the market's moving there. So Alibaba is still going to be the big one, right? Their ecosystem, at least if you sell products that women buy, you cannot avoid Xiaohongshu and Tmall, right? You can, it's at least half of your sales. But the other half, we used to think it would all be in like JD, and maybe you have like a VIP thing for fashion, whatever it is. Not so much. Now that Douyin is, I think this is going to be the next wave, and I think it's going to be big. So I think you're going to see them take a big chunk, and maybe even out of JD in non, like JD's strong in appliances, 3C, things like this. And other things like beverage, they do huge volume, very strong in like spirits and in wine and beer and stuff. But it's very limited, right? And there's still a chunk of sales, but I'm seeing that shrink and I'm seeing the other one pop. So it's quite an interesting change. And I don't know what's going to happen now because it's mushy. All the ecosystems, all their walls are down. We don't know what the final result is going to be. Is traffic going to come from here to there to go? It's going to bounce around. We have no idea. Consumers seem to prefer 2 modes of commerce, live or marketplace. Live is that Hollywood show. It's engaged with an influencer, but that could happen in 3 places. Kuaishou, which is big in a lot of different categories. I'd love to see my clients get in there when they get to scale. Douyin is the biggest, and Tmall. So you've got Douyin for short video plus live stream and commerce now. Alibaba is the biggest still in live stream commerce by far. You know, they pioneered it and they still have a big chunk of the revenue, but 2020, it was like 80% market share. And this year it's not so much, you know? So I think they've dropped, and I think other platforms are taking a big chunk, but that part to me is exciting. It's not a good thing that everything's controlled by 1 or 2 people. or one or two groups. It's actually good for brands now. They have choices. They have a word that I can't even believe I'm saying, but it is true: leverage. I think we're getting smoother onboarding processes with the platforms. It's easier to get on, it's easier to get support, easier to get into events, more flexible arrangements in terms of marketing and programs. And I think largely this is a great thing. And for brands, it lowers their risk of dependence on any one or two things. So they now have multiple channels. It's more diverse. It's more complicated to operate, and yes, a little more expensive. However, it's way less risky. And I think it's less expensive overall. As an example, if your brand is bought by JD, so for example, you get into JD Slian, you have like a fixed cost of sales around 21%, including logistics, and no other expenses. So let's say that's 15-20% of your revenue. Well, that's beautiful, right? It's a high margin. If you do the same in Tmall, right, you're going to pay a higher cost of sale because it's a marketplace and it's very competitive. So depending on your structure coming in, you can make lots of money in different ways. And you also don't have to get forced into discounting. So here's a big trend that I think is interesting for people listening. Anything new that's fresh, you know, there's like this new wave, I think, of consumers now in China. They're really sick of the old stuff, right? So if they'll take a deal on your older stock, but if you have like new stock, you can sell it very quickly at full price right now, at least right this season. I think there's a limit in the supply chain globally. And so if you actually have fresh inventory, so the new in-season stuff or next season stuff coming in, I think you'll do quite well. I mean, my brands that are doing that are crushing it. The ones that are kind of having supply chain problems, it's a bit of a muted sort of period for them. But the ones with full stock of the new stuff are selling out quite quickly and at higher margins than we ever expected. So that's good news. And I think that's good for new brands coming in because consumers are kind of looking for something new and interesting, and they want to be entertained and they want a showcase of new experiences. So I think that's something you guys can all focus on if you're thinking about coming to China. I mean, what kind of experience can you orchestrate around your brand and your product collections so that you can scale and have, you know, constant sustainable growth in your business in China?
Not all brands are ready for China, right? And you always speak about unfair advantage. So what does that actually mean? And how do brands know that they have an unfair advantage to enter into China?
Good question. So if you really want to know how to do this right, don't go and meet a new partner for China like us. Go knock on the door of any China-based accelerator and go ask any of the people in there, as a foreigner coming into China, what you need to get funding and be successful in the market. Every single accelerator worth their salt will look at you unfair advantage. Now, let me define what that is. There's many, all right? Many kinds of unfair advantage. I mean, you could just have like crazy guanxi, right? And have like privileged access to relationships that no one else has. That's a form of unfair advantage. But for most brands coming in, they don't have that, right? So what do you got? One is you can have control of a commodity. I have a client, old client, back in the day, is 65% of global production of an organic organism grown only in one part of the US that has to be licensed, and he owns 65% of the land. Now, how do you think, here's a funny thing, his product is only eaten and used by Chinese globally. It's a traditional medicine product, but it can only be made in this place and certified there. So how do you think his business is? He's got a monopoly position on the global trade of this item, right? So that's an example of an unfair advantage. Another would be technology, UX. We've talked Douyin. ByteDance's technology is quite significant. I don't think people realize how powerful it is. You've done TikToks, but China's taken that, you know, Douyin in China has gone several iterations beyond what TikTok is outside China, right? Very far beyond in terms of functionality and scale. And it's making waves. It's changing habits in people. So I think if you have a disruptive technology or user experience, China is very forgiving for you, right? It is unforgiving of people who stay put and very forgiving and open to people who want to change things. So that's a unique thing. So that can be an unfair advantage. But the one that's most accessible to brands is your brand equity. It's your brand strength. It's your traction with Chinese consumers, your potential to grow. And the most powerful form of that comes from outside China. The signal coming from the rest of the world that you're the hottest, coolest, latest brand. That's why it doesn't matter if you're Louis Vuitton or Chanel or whatever. They're super powerful in China, super famous, right? And they have a huge business. However, that doesn't mean small brands can't win. Like, we've got a luxury brand we run. I'm blown away at the popularity of this brand. It's a tiny little company from Australia. That's why I mentioned it. They have gradually, first of all, the designer of the brand has really thought China in mind from the beginning. So even though he's in New York now, he works with celebrities and he designs his collection so they look great on Asian bodies, right? Very smart this way. And he seeds the market properly, you know, in the classic form of seeding with celebrities. And it works well, right? So his brand after the last 3 years has really taken off, and now it's just on fire. And so you can do that, right? If you have that traction outside China, it's easy to spill inside China because Chinese people are hip, right? For lack of a better term, they're very trend followers, right? They're on trend and they're starting and pioneering their own trends. So they're extremely capable of doing this. So if you've got traction outside China, it works to flow into China and you can almost replicate the same growth. That's one type of an unfair advantage. It's almost like having nitrous in your car, right? No one else has it. You're in a race, you have nitrous, you're gonna win, right? That's the gas that no one else has, right? The extra rocket fuel. That works. Another is a heritage story that's unrivaled. So if you have heritage that is almost like provenance at an antiquities auction, the authenticity of the product must come, right? This connoisseurship around your brand somewhere outside of China. This is ideal. It's really about how well you curate your advantage outside China. Then you can spill it inside China. And that's really what it's all about. It's having traction or heritage or sort of a safety component or an exclusivity component to your brand, to your products before you come in. Then you're ready. Like, brand strength is everything in China. It's not one thing, it's everything.
You mentioned about category, right? So having an unfair advantage and being in a hot category. I can't really, I mean, are there any categories that is currently not in China?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like beef jerky from the US, right? Like, who wants it? It's terrible, right? Like, Chinese aren't gonna eat it. I mean, there's a lot of things that Americans eat, like 4-pound cheeseburgers and 60-pound steaks that aren't on Chinese tables. There's plenty of categories, right? If Chinese don't want it, they're not gonna have it. I think a category that is going to take off but hasn't yet is anything that is not destroying the environment, right? Because now not only is the government involved, Alibaba and the platforms are being forced into it. So I think one way or another, people are going to become good custodians of health in China in general. So you're going to see emerging categories around this, and it's going to be fast and furious. And a lot of hot categories that we see tend to be very specialized personal passions, hobbies. Let's say you're a gamer doing X, or you're a surfer, or you're a glamper. Like, there's stuff that's emerging now that the growth rates are crazy, and it makes no sense, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So, but you're asking me right now. I mean, it might be different in 2 weeks. I mean, China changes, the light switch goes on all the time, and all the different. What you really want to do is obviously be in the path of growth. But even if you're in a category that's fairly mature, like beauty, okay? Beauty is absolutely, it's the biggest beauty market in the world, right? It's absolutely insane. But you know what's underserved? Skin tech. I mean, actual technology, right? So I had a potential client, we didn't sign them. They literally blew my mind. And I thought we had a good business in China. I mean, I think we have a good business in China. I mean, we got cool brands. I did. Anyway, they've got one brand. It's an Israeli company, and they do this beauty tech And it's this weird like home microsurgery equipment. You can like give yourself this skin surgery, whatever, this micro skin treatment, blah. I didn't even really understand it or how it works. Whatever. We're having a conversation and they're like, so, we things have gone pretty well in the last 4 years. And, we want to launch this new product we have. And I'm like, well, how are you guys, what about it? Oh, we're unhappy with our distributor. It's this and that. And we're thinking about some change. He's not doing the right things. Like, okay, let me take a look. He's like, and then I told him some stuff that we're doing for other stuff. And he's like, Josh, those examples you're giving, like 100 million RMB, 200, blah, blah, blah for those brands. Yeah, that's really not at the level. I'm like, huh? He's like, we did 1 billion RMB last year. I'm like,
oh, wow.
What? On what? And he's like, on that product. And we looked it up. And I was like, wow. Like, not just wow, just wow. So like in a category like beauty that is so big and so competitive, design some tech, right? And now you've created a new category and you have 1 billion RMB business, right? So I wouldn't look at it as much as, is there something you should jump into like a hot category, as much as if you've got a great story and you own your IP in China and it's defendable, then you go into a category, you can actually develop new products, right? You can start your business new. You can look at China as really the testing ground for your future, because the future of digital is China. It's defining all the categories. People in the West are copying China. I think this whole thing about moving everyone to the Metaverse is basically desperation, right? In a lot of ways, China's really moved many iterations away from Web 2.0 outside China. They've created their own sort of world. And I think it's going to continue to evolve in exponential ways. And I think a lot of that sort of digital architecture that they built, those stacks are going to get more sophisticated and interesting.
You're very entrepreneurial, founded 5-6 companies. Name one, what mistake have you made in your China business journey?
Oh, I think we gave you a list. Should we go back to the name of my company, which is the most glaring error in my entire life as a business owner, like starting a company and then staying with it without rebranding it, even though the model completely changed. Like a very China story, right? You go in and things just didn't work out, so you pivot. What does pivoting mean? It means you failed and you got to figure out how to make money and do something else. So you move into like a parallel trade or something, and here we are today. So that would be like, I made a lot of mistakes. One is the assumption that anything that you've got outside is relevant inside. That's the biggest problem everyone makes. I made it 8.5 years ago when I moved over. I thought I could migrate the concepts around subscription and data. Now in the US, anything is a service, right? It's gone from data as a service or software as a service. Now it's anything as a service, right? You've heard that. Like literally everything is a service and it's delivered to your door. China's not there, right? This is just, they're not there yet. They're still traders at their core. It's a trader mentality. That may change, but right now that model broke. It wasn't the right model for the market. And I didn't adjust some of our name strategy around a whole new thing, because it had already taken off in some ways as a reputation. So here you go. There's my most glaring error. You can see it.
I think that's great. Clear. Well, I really like to thank you so much for your time today, Josh. For our listeners, please follow Josh Gardner on LinkedIn. He shares incredible insights. He say it as he means it. Sometimes his content he try to tend to turn people off rather than come into China. China is a great place, isn't it? But extremely exciting content. So I'd like to thank you so much for your time. We'll put Josh's LinkedIn link in our blurb, as well as KungFu Data's website on our blog as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And by the way, I am going to respond to that. Just one thing. Look, this market has enough cheerleaders, right? China has enough cheerleaders. It needs a truth teller. It needs someone who's going to tell it how it is and what's going to happen, right? And share the things that aren't always most pleasant, right? But that's the stuff I think people need to know, right? It's not all peaches and cream. And by the way, there are a lot of successful people in China, and there's a lot of successful businesses. I have one of them. So you can do it. It's just you need to come in eyes wide open, not shut. So
I think you're very realistic in your content, right? Because people think they can, with 1.4 billion, with, you know, this exponential growth, they can just come in and be successful overnight. But the story is that's not the case. I mean, you've mentioned having unfair advantage, having defendable position. That's really important as a brand going into China, and you have to be quite humble and nimble, and as well as understand who your consumers are to be in the right platform. So I think what you say and how you put it is very interesting. I'm a great fan.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Annie. And I really enjoyed it. And obviously, you know where to reach me.